And we are live. So I am going to show you, I'll be spraying today. Really what it comes down to, one of my guys is sick, so I'm going to jump in the booth and spray. I won't be using this machine, which I can't wait to use. This is our automated spray line, and we are really pumped to use it, but that's not today. I'm going to be doing this like we always do it in our spray booth. This is a global finishing enclosed spray booth. It's a 26 or 28 by 14 by 9, and here's our rack system. So I'm going to walk inside the booth through the man door, but we have racks in there right now, and outside the booth it's a little messy, which I don't like, but it's because we have everything pushed aside to put this machine in. So we use these Richelieu, these drying racks. They're good. There's some drawbacks to them, but in all intents and purposes, it's probably the best thing you can get for this system. We do have some that are in fabrication that we're making ourselves. But here's what it looks like. I'm going to show you some coatings that we typically spray. A lot of questions I get asked, what coatings do you use? What makes one better than the other? Typically, we're using something in this family right here. This is Malaysia, this is Ilva, this is Renner, water-based, and this is a primer. This is a vinyl sealer primer. Below me is an Envirolac, the 170 primer. It's white, it's water-based. That's a two-part. All these are two-part products with the exception of the vinyl sealer. This is an optional. The water-based Renner is an optional 1K or 2K product. You can catalyze this or you don't have to. We definitely catalyze it, but if you can brush and roll this, which is not really what we do, but you can. So some people opt to use this uncatalyzed. This is it's a good water-based product. The Malaysia water-based, I don't like it as much as the Renner water-based if people are curious. These are all 20 sheens except for the primer. The vinyl sealer is basically a dead flat. We use vinyl sealer a lot, and it's really our go-to primer. It's just much better than some of the homeowner versions. This is what I would not recommend, and they happen to fall in our shop because we've had them from our days of painting. But people tout that they can use emerald urethane trim enamel on their cabinets. It's a terrible product for cabinets. It's a pretty decent product for trim. But there's no cost advantage of using this. It takes forever to dry. It's not scratch resistant. It's not chip resistant. It's really not made for cabinets at all. Cabinet coat is another homeowner product. If you are getting a quote from a professional refinisher and they're using cabinet coat, that is not professional at all. And a lot of people use bin as a go-between between what they have now and their finish coats. It is not bad. There's definitely other alternatives out there. We've used bin plenty of times. In the right setting, it's a good product to use. But again, it's not the best. So if you're trying to up your game, you're going to get yourself away from bin. Even the Envirolac water-based product, a lot of people use a solvent-based. Bin is alcohol-based, so it dries really fast. But people get away from the water-based because it doesn't block the tannins, the grease, etc. That Envirolac really does a good job, and so does the vinyl sealer. But if you're worried about spraying solvents or using solvents, the Envirolac primer is good. It's very thick. It is a little harder to use. You need a bigger pump to spray it. But once it locks in the grease or the tannins in the first coat, the second coat really does really well. It's very hard. It's very durable. It powders up when you sand it. It's a nice product to use. All these top coats are great. My favorite would be the solvent poly from Malaysia. Catalyzed, it's just a fantastic product. The dry time is quick. It's just better than anything else. The water-based products are very nice. You need bigger pumps, you need more time. But again, if you're spraying a water-based system, the Renner water-based is better than Malaysia water-based in my opinion. We will be spraying primarily a Renner water-based system through this whole line with an Envirolac primer because this is a water-based line and we're not doing solvents to that. We will be continuing to spray other specialty finishes inside the booth. So I'm going to walk you in the booth, show you what this looks like. It might get a little loud in here. We have a 12,000 CFM fan in here, or exhaust behind me. And here are the racks that I will be spraying today. We have 5 in here, so there's a couple hundred pieces in here. We have some gray vinyl sealer on this, and the only reason we have gray vinyl sealer is we ran out of white, and supply chain is a little tough. So typically, I'm always trying to match my primer sealer with the top coat. Just makes it a lot easier. In this case, we just didn't have enough supply. Our supply showed up a little late. So we will have to work with what we've got, and that's how it works in this business. One color is going to be super white, another color is extra white, which isn't fun to watch getting sprayed white on white. And then there's some other varieties back there. So I'll be spraying out of a Kremlin. This is a 10-to-1 Kremlin. This is our solvent pump. This is our water-based pump. And unfortunately, this one is in for repairs. There's a fitting in here that, again, supply chain hasn't arrived yet. So we'll be switching from solvent to water-based and back again out of the one pump, which I don't like to do. A lot of lighting in here. This is what you're looking for professional finishing. And the reason that we do this is the filters on this end block all the contamination and the dust, etc., coming into the booth. So when you're getting your doors professionally done, they should be doing it in a booth. That's it. I'm going to get my whites on and we're going to start rocking and rolling. I'll be wearing a respirator. That's what you have to wear. And I don't know if I'll be filming the whole entire process, but the spray pattern, the coating, the thickness of the coating, all things that you have to keep consistent to get the finish that you're looking for. That's really it. Again, the product's very important, the machine's very important, the gun's very important, the pumps, etc., the filtration process, but it really all starts with the prep. I'm gonna walk you back just one more second and show you some doors that are about to get primed. So these doors have been cleaned and sanded. So they get cleaned first, degreased, and then they get sanded, and then they get primed. Do we sand between coats? Mistakes will sand out, but typically these coatings are made for 1-in-1. So one prime coat at the correct millage. So if you need to do 2 just to get that proper build, then you need to do 2. The top coat's the same. But a lot of these products are compatible where there's a primer and a top coat that have the correct build. So let's say it's 3 to 6 mil or 4 to 6 mil wet on the primer, 4 to 6 mil wet on the dry, on the finish, and then that will give you the actual coating that it's spec'd from the factory. Now, when people do 2 coats primer, 2 coats top coats, what happens is you might have some cracks in it, and you're just overcoating. You're putting too much material on it. Some of this stuff dries so fast that it's a mess. Some of this stuff dries really slowly, and that's a mess too. So you really have to be consistent. Now, when you sand, you're only sanding out mistakes, but you still have to have the same amount of dry thickness on your material or on your coating. So if you're over sanding, you're thinning out the actual coating of your sealer or your top coat, and it's not as durable. So you need to use this thing I bring out all the time. This is a mill gauge, and this measures my wet coating. It doesn't measure the dry because it can't penetrate through the coating, but it does measure the wet one. Any coating manufacturer is going to give them out to you for free, and you should use it. What you do is you spray on a sample or the back side of a drawer, get your spray pattern good, and then you're going to dip this into the coating itself, and I do this every time just to make sure I'm consistent, and then you pull it out and you'll see some dots. Wherever your last dot is, that's basically your thickness. So this gauge has 1 to 80, and that's some of these industrial coatings need to be very, very thick. But in our world, 4 to 6 mil wet is what you're looking for. So again, over sanding between coats, that's gonna lead you to a lot of mistakes. My biggest pet peeve is corners and edges. People over sand and it leaves it very vulnerable for chips, scratches. That's what happens all the time. So sanding between coats isn't necessary if you're good at what you're doing. We do have a sanding machine, an automated sanding machine back there. We have another one coming. And these machines are much better than using your hands most of the time. Some of the fine detail sanding you need to do by hands. But these machines are made to just to abrade the surface, to do like a polish, and then, really, polish is not the right word, but abrade the surface for the next coat. Most of these coatings are wet on wet. That does not mean you get to spray a wet coating on a not finished or a not dry door. That means that there's an open time where another coat can go on without having to sand between. Typically, it's between 1 and 3 hours after you sprayed your first coat. So, for example, if I'm spraying my finished coat and I want to do a 2-coat build, I spray it. In this case, the solvent material is going to dry in about 20 minutes, maybe 30. I have between 1 hour and 3 hours. So after 30 minutes of dry, I can wait 30 minutes and then respray my final coat. That's called wet on wet. Again, it's not wet, but that's just the terminology. And I'm going to spray my second final coat between that 1 and 3 hours, and I don't have to sand. The only reason you would have to sand is if you exceed that wet open time. So if I wait after 3 hours, let's pretend 3 hours and 1 minute, I want to spray my next coat, then I would have to abrade the surface, and I'm going to break the sheen of the surface, not sand it. We're just using we're using a polish pad. They're over there, but it's just a polish pad. It's really just to break the sheen, and it allows a mechanical bond between the new coat and the old coat. If you start sanding, then you're going to take away the dry mill thickness, and then you're a whole different issue. So that's what wet on wet means. That's sanding between coats. All this is through experience, knowledge, trial and error, and then obviously reading the manufacturer's notes, because they test this all the time. So just follow that. Somebody saying that they're sanded a million times, they put a million coats on, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a better job. In fact, it could lead you to mistakes. Again, and don't use these homeowner products. This is for homeowners. This is not for professional finishers at all. If somebody's telling you you're going to use this, that's a no-no. You've hired the wrong guy. You want something like this in this family. And we are typically using Malaysia and Renner, Envirolac and Centurion. There's a million companies out there. Some are good. We use what works. So this is